Hi folks, welcome back to my channel. I'm Ashley of Ashley Plans and Reads. And as you know, I love to read. It's a big part of my channel. And one of my favorite podcasters is Anne Bogel. And she has a podcast called What Should I Read Next, in which she has a guest on and she asks them to tell her 3 books they love, 1 book they do not, and what they're currently reading. And then she gives them reading suggestions. She gives them recommendations. So I thought that would be a really great way to kind of introduce you to my reading taste. So I'm going to tell you 3 books I love, 1 I do not, and I don't shy away from using the word hate. I know a lot of readers don't like to do that, but I'm not one of them. So that's what today's video is all about. All right, so I have my 3 books here, and I have, one of them is my all-time favorite novel. One of them is a story that just is very, very meaningful to me, and the other kind of represents some other aspects of my reading life that are important to me. And so we will start with my all-time favorite, and that is, it does not have a book jacket because I don't know what happened to it, but it's Animal Dreams by Barbara Kingsolver. Barbara Kingsolver is my all-time favorite author. Number 1, I will read anything she writes and have. And this one is my favorite of hers. So it is my all-time favorite book. It is about a woman who returns home to her small town in New Mexico to kind of spend time with her ailing father and go with him through the end of his life. Basically, he has Alzheimer's and she's just there to do the taking care of an elderly parent thing. She is one of 2 girls. Her sister has traveled to a South American country. I cannot remember which one specifically, but there are rebellions and uprisings happening in this country, and her sister has gone to support those. And she and her sister are incredibly close. They experienced some traumatic events in their childhood, and she spends a lot of her time thinking about her sister, and that is a big reason why I love this book so much. I love any story that has to do with sisters. I am one of 2 sisters, and mine is my best friend, and I just relate so much to the way the narrator relates to her sister and the way she feels about her and all of that kind of thing. And she finds herself in some healing and all of that going back home. And I love everything about this book. It is so beautifully written. I mean, if you've read any Kingsolver, you know how fantastic she is, how fantastic a writer she is. And if you have not yet read this one, I highly recommend it. Please, please, please. I love this book. It's time for a reread. I've read it twice already. It's time to read it again. So that is my first book. That was Animal Dreams by Barbara Kingsolver. The next one is the one that just means a lot to me. The story has for a long time, and if you know me in real life, you know how much this book means to me. So that book is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. And this is, I have many editions of this. This is the most beautiful, I think. My best friend gave me this one a long time ago, but it just has the most gorgeous illustrations. That's a baby laughing for the first time, and the fairies. That's how fairies came to exist, in case you haven't read it and don't know. It was the first baby's laugh for the first time, scattered about, and that's how we got fairies. Anyway, so what I love about this one, I up front, let me say, I know that there are some seriously problematic elements in this story, particularly as it relates to the portrayal of Indigenous peoples, Tiger Lily, and that whole storyline. It's a problem. And when I read this to my kids, we talk about that and I correct it. So I just want to say that up front. I'm very aware of that. So, but what I do love about this story is that anyone who knows me in real life is laughing right now with that sigh and the hug of the book. When this story first really started to get into my soul, I was working as a nanny in Chicago, and I just really started to understand how important it is for children to never lose their sense of imagination and adventure, and how important stories are to children, and to all of us, to grown-ups too. This book is a lot about story. I mean, that's how Peter Pan is a story that Wendy tells her brothers, and Peter comes to the window so that he can hear the stories about himself, because if you didn't know, Peter is a deeply narcissistic boy. But he didn't grow up with a mother, and that is the other, I think, crucial part of this story and why it means so much to me. It has deeply informed my approach to motherhood. I think this story is more about Wendy than it is about Peter. Wendy is the girl who grows up and never loses those memories of Neverland, and she passes them on to her children, and she says, keep the window open because you never know when Peter will show up. And I love that so much. She recognizes that we have to grow up at some point, but we don't have to lose everything we had in childhood, everything that we were and loved and enjoyed, the adventures. That doesn't have to disappear. In fact, it's crucial that we hold on to it, and so that we can pass it on to our own children. And I cannot tell you how much that informs my approach to motherhood, my approach to interacting with all children, and this is really Wendy's story. It's called Peter Pan, but it's Wendy's story, and she's the one that we look to for the lessons. And I love it. I love it so much that I have a Peter Pan inspired tattoo. It's an acorn and a thimble and 2 Neverland stars. The acorn and thimble, Peter and Wendy give one another an acorn and thimble. That's their kiss. So that represents my husband and I, and then the 2 stars are for my children. I was so fortunate to have an old friend be the artist for it, and she did a phenomenal job, and I'm so happy with it. And it just means the world to me that, you know, I carry it with me everywhere. This story means everything to me. And in fact, I can show you this right here, so originally it was written as a play, and this is the Plays of J.M. Barrie, Peter Pan. And this edition, it's not a first edition, but it was printed in J.M. Barrie's lifetime. And my husband, when we were very, very first dating, he took a trip to New Orleans and hunted this down for me in New Orleans' many rare and used bookstores, and he hunted this one down for me. And he didn't give it to me until a few months later, but it was my Christmas gift, and when he gave me this, I knew I would marry him. And we'd been dating 2 months, and I knew I would marry him when he gifted this to me, because I knew that he not only understood me, but my interests and the things I care about mattered to him too. And so this is one of my most treasured possessions. I cannot, have I made it clear how much I love this story? Because I really, really do. Okay, so that was Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie, in case you forgot. Okay, so the last one is The Turner House by Angela Florney. And this one is an excellent example. This kind of covers two areas of my reading life that I especially love when they combine, so that's why I picked this book. I love, love, love a dysfunctional family narrative, literary fiction novel. Dysfunctional, quirky, normal, just working through their issues, because every family has issues that they need to work through. And this one is about a Black family. And so this kind of also represents my commitment to read more diversely, read more own stories, and just read outside of my own experiences, read less white, basically. This is about the family house that they kind of have to, the children have to come home to and make some decisions about after the deaths of their parents. And I mean, there are The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. I mean, there are so many books like this where the house itself is a character, and it brings up all these things for families and siblings and what it was like to be the children of their parents. And any story like that, I absolutely adore. I am a sucker for a dysfunctional family story, and I have found that reading more diversely, reading stories of experiences of people that don't look like me, has been key in the way that I see the world and hopefully interact with it. Reading changes us, and so reading more diversely will change you too. And if you're not already paying attention to who and what you're reading, start, because it matters. So that kind of rounds out my 3 books I love. So that is The Turner House by Angela Florney. And this was a National Book finalist, so, you know, pretty awesome. I think it was well deserved. Okay, so I don't actually have a copy of the book that I hate, because I hate it. Why would I keep it? As you can see, that book is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. And I know that this is an unpopular opinion. This book was huge a few years ago when it first came out. And he recently had another one come out called, I don't even know, because I didn't really pay attention. But people love that one too. I went into it really wanting to like it. I thought it would be a great kind of like easy sci-fi for me. And it's basically a story of the multiverse, which I thought was a really intriguing premise. It basically is a concept that says, you know, there are parallel universes, infinite parallel universes to the one you're currently living in. So there are infinite versions of you in infinite versions of your life, basically, that all hinge on one decision at any given moment, and infinite possibilities of who you become and what your life becomes. And so this man basically realizes that he like sees into another one of these multiverses of his own life, and he has to rescue his wife from whatever. And that's problem number 1 that I had with it. I hate that trope where, I mean, and you see it a lot, especially in superhero movies and stories, where I think it's referred to as like the woman in the freezer or something like that, where the impetus for the man's heroic narrative is his wife is killed, or, you know, female lover is killed or kidnapped or whatever, and he has to avenge her death. And, you know, the woman only exists in the story in order to set him off on his heroic path, and she has to die in order to do that. So I hate that trope. That's pretty much a non-starter for me. So, you know, I didn't love that. And I also just found that all of the female characters in the story were incredibly one-dimensional and only served to further his heroic narrative. And that just doesn't do it for me. Ever. I just need more. And that's also why I tend to not read very many books written by men anymore, because I find very, very few of them can capably write a three-dimensional woman who has purpose beyond what she means to the man or can do for the man. And this book did none of that. So that's why I hated it. And I'm sorry that's an unpopular opinion, but there it is. Reading is deeply personal, and what works for me may not work for you, and what works for you may not work for me. And that's okay. I know a lot of my favorites, even beyond these three that I talked about, are not at all what a lot of people want. And I have no problem with that. I love a dark and brooding and character-driven novel, and I know that many people are like, nothing even happens in character-driven novels, which, you know, is fair, and they need more plot, and that's, you know, just two different ways of reading, and there's nothing wrong with that. So that does it for the three books that I love and one book I don't, and hopefully that gives you a little more insight into my reading tastes. And I will link Anne Bogel, her Instagram accounts, and also her podcast in the description box below. So be sure to check her out. Her podcast is fantastic. I've not yet been a guest. Anne Bogel, if you're listening, you're definitely not listening, but I have applied many times and I'm not giving up. Anyway, that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Give me a thumbs up if you feel so inclined, and let me know down in the comments anything about books. Talk to me about how you like to read. I can't wait to hear it. And I will see you soon. Bye.